guys for listening, and I should leave so that Andrew has the chance to give his talk. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation, and we look forward to hosting Andrew Dotson next. So we'll just be here just a few minutes so that he can put his PowerPoint presentation up, and I will be coming back in about 2 minutes to go ahead and introduce him. Thanks, everyone. Well, welcome to the Remote Experience for Young Engineers and Scientists program known as REYES. My name is Giovanna Gennard. I'm the co-founder and chair of the REYES program, and I will serve as your host for today's lecture, Tensors and Memes, an unorthodox approach to science communication, featuring Andrew Dotson. Today's discussion offers us insights into Andrew's unorthodox experience communicating about science on his physics YouTube channel, where he has amassed 235,000 followers. Throughout this webcast, you may submit questions through the Q&A box on your Zoom screen. And following Andrew Dotson's lecture, we will answer as many of your questions as time allows. It is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Andrew Dotson, who is a graduate student at New Mexico State University, where he's pursuing a PhD specializing in theoretical nuclear physics. He's also been sharing his experience pursuing his PhD on YouTube for the past 6 years through his vlogs, skits, as well as lectures. Andrew has been a strong supporter of our program, where he's presented for 4 consecutive years, and he's really been helping us promote the REYES program among his 250,000 global followers. We're so grateful to Andrew for sharing his knowledge freely and encouraging aspiring scientists like you to pursue careers in STEM. Please join me in welcoming Andrew Dotson to REYES.
Well, thank you so much for the kind words and for the invite. I always love participating with REYES whenever I can. It's such a great program that they pour so much effort into making accessible to anybody who just has some time on their hands to watch these lectures and see what's out there in physics and STEM. So, you know, people like Giovanna and Raul and all of them, they're the real heroes for putting all this stuff on each year, because it's not easy work. But in any case, yeah, my name is Andrew Dotson. I'm going to be talking about my weird approach to science communication, where I've started a YouTube channel about 6 or so years ago, just talking about physics, talking about my experiences in physics, communicating the experience going from starting an undergraduate to now trying to finish my PhD. And at the end, I'm going to try to convince some of you to share some of your experiences as well, maybe start making videos. Let's see, there we go. As a little bit of a background, I am a PhD student at New Mexico State University. I'm doing my PhD in nuclear theory. So it seems like the last talk I was in good company there. We can keep the conversation going at the end of this talk on just nuclear theory, if that's where the interest is actually at. So that's definitely this Homer Simpson. That's how I went in expecting my self-image to be at the end of being a theoretical physics student, but in reality, it's been more like Patrick, just not really knowing how to use the tools that I'm using, and I just look scared all the time. I do theoretical physics, which means I'm a person who tries to use math to come up with equations to make predictions that one would measure in experiments. So I'm not the person who would go out into the halls of Jefferson Lab and observe certain particles and certain processes, but I would be a person who's trying to make predictions for what you would see. And all of this has to do with understanding the structure of matter. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about this from the previous talks, but I doubt this is the first time you've seen this picture of the standard model, and it definitely won't be the last time. But this is basically something like our modern day periodic table or modern day organization of all of the fundamental building blocks of nature. And it's supposed to, there's a very simple equation called the standard model Lagrangian, which describes how all of these particles talk to each other, how they're allowed to communicate. And it's given as follows. Now, I think we got started a little bit late, but we should have about 40 minutes. So let's go ahead and go through each line to make sure we're all on the same page. So in line one, what we see, I'm just kidding, we're not doing that. But this is the equation in principle that contains all of the information of how scattering processes happen, what's allowed to happen when particles interact with each other, what particles can you produce in the final state. It should be contained in there if you're smart enough to solve the equations. Now, what I do, these fundamental building blocks like quarks and gluons are not what reach the detectors. By the time something reaches the detectors, the quarks and gluons undergo something called hadronization, where they become more complicated composite particles like the proton and the neutron and exotic mesons, like what was mentioned in the previous talk by Wyatt. And one simple way of looking at these protons and neutrons, sometimes collectively referred to as the nucleon, is we think of them as being made up of three quarks, 2 up quarks and a down quark for the proton, 2 downs and an up for a neutron, 2 ups. And when you add the charges up together, you get the +1 charge of the proton and the 0, the neutral charge of the proton. It's nice and simple. It's intuitive. Unfortunately, it's just not quite correct. In reality, what's inside of the proton is a much more dynamic question to answer. At any point, those quarks, those so-called valence quarks, the 3 quarks that we think of making up the proton and neutron, they talk to each other, not only electromagnetically, but through the strong nuclear force. And they do that by exchanging these particles called gluons. And those gluons at any point can split into quark-antiquark pairs that are popping in and out. And all of this stuff contributes to the properties of the proton that we know and love. Properties like its charge, its spin, its mass, magnetic moment, all of these things. And the fact that the inside of the proton is such a dynamic system makes it pretty difficult to answer questions like how are things like charge distributed inside of the proton, because it's not just 3 quarks. Now, my research is interested in a different property of matter that maybe you haven't heard of that is called the D term. This is related to an object called the energy momentum tensor, and for reasons I won't get into here, we think it's related to internal pressure and shear forces inside of the proton and neutron. And so as a consequence, we think it's deeply related to the stability of particles. Understanding the pressure distribution inside of the particle, and that balance of pressure is what makes it inherently stable or unstable. And so understanding this D term, that's the point of my research, allows you to test the stability of composite particles in various models. Okay, that's all I'm going to get into with the research spiel. That's the bit of background on what I'm doing in graduate school. And on top of that, I also make physics videos, usually on what I'm doing in graduate school. For this talk, I won't be delving into my research anymore, but I would like to share more about why I started my YouTube channel and the goal I think it serves, as well as a little bit of the direction it's headed on the way. Okay. So there's an abundance of popular science shows that we've all seen. Into the Universe with Stephen Hawking, Cosmos, Carl Sagan, the list goes on and on. And those do a really good job reeling prospective physics students in and showing all of the crazy things that theorists are thinking of and experimentalists are measuring and observationalists are seeing in the sky. But most of your time will probably not be spent studying black holes and string theory in your first year physics courses. It's not really going to be, you may think you're going in, you're going to be unifying GR with quantum mechanics, but for a while, it's going to be mg cosine thetas for you. That's just the honest to goodness truth. And the goal of this talk is not to convince you that these pop science topics need to work their way into the physics classroom more, but there is an abundance of them. And so it would be nice if there was more exposition out there on what studying physics actually entails in a way that keeps those prospective physics students interested. Something other than just looking at the curriculum on your university website or sitting through actual, lectures. And I think YouTube is a great way to do that, and other forms of social media as well. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on, is explaining, is talking about how my videos, I hope, explain the process of getting a physics degree in different ways through the different styles of videos that I make, and maybe give you some ideas of what you could make in the future when you decide you want to share your experiences as well. Okay. So just to start out, I didn't actually start out as a physics major. I entered undergrad as a bio student. And long story short, I wanted to be a medical doctor until I realized not loving biology is something of a deal breaker. The memorization was just way too much for me to keep up with. Physics seemed more self-contained and satisfying to learn about, at least in real time. I'm sure if you go far enough in biology, it starts coming together. But in physics, it felt less like having to memorize things, or seemed like less like having to memorize things, and more of understanding why it happened, why the steps in the cycle are what they are, rather than telling you that I know all the names of all of the steps of the cycle. So when I made that decision to switch to physics from biology, I moved back home and I wanted to get some idea of what to expect next. And so naturally, I went to YouTube. I Googled, like, okay, what is it like week as a physics major? This was, 7 or so years ago when I was trying to understand this. Was a time when vlogs were a lot more popular than they kind of are today, at least from what I'm seeing. And so I went to YouTube. I said, maybe there's someone vlogging about what physics is like. And I came across a YouTuber named Simon Clark, who made all of these videos on what it was like doing physics at Oxford and later at Exeter. And that was super useful because physics is universal. It's not like people at the prestigious universities get access to the secret laws of physics and the rest of us are stuck with learning Newton's laws. Maybe people at Oxford learn spherical harmonics or something sooner, but I think you get what I mean. But I knew physics had the stigma of being for smart people. And then there's me, who didn't graduate high school with honors. And, starting a semester or two of physics, or having started a semester of two of physics and not having failed miserably, I thought maybe that would be cool to document and show people that it's not just for geniuses. Definitely not that that's what Simon Clark was communicating. It's just, that's like what we project onto those kinds of videos. That's not him necessarily, but I thought maybe that could be something that would be cool for people to see, a path towards a physics career where nothing about the person pursuing it screamed academic excellence. And so I wanted to start making videos on what it's like to go to a regular 4-year university, and I started doing that. So I made my channel. I had a little camcorder. I recorded going to and coming from class, hanging out with the Society of Physics students. And I'd really encourage any physics major to join their Society of Physics students, by the way, if your university offers one. It just makes the quality of life so much better. No matter how much you think you like doing physics by yourself or you don't want other people involved, that's what I thought. SPS made things a lot better. I would really give it a shot. But in any case, I would record what I was studying, what topics I was struggling with or enjoyed, or had a hard time watching. If I had a hard time with these classes, I'd want to emphasize what it was I was struggling with and what the resolution was. And I have a really hard time watching those videos nowadays because they're pretty cringy, but they were pretty honest. And so these first types of videos that I made definitely fell under the category of vlogs. And I really enjoyed talking about what I was learning, but with the vlogs, it got to a point where if I did mention a buzzword like Klebsch-Gordon coefficients, I'd want to be able to talk about them. I don't want to just throw the name out there and move on. And you can't spend 10 minutes of a vlog talking about detailed physics too much. That's not why people are there. And so I thought I'd start exploring a new type of video format for myself anyways, which led to me making video lectures. Videos where I could be as thorough in a derivation as I would want it to be if I was watching it. So for example, I would make lectures converting Maxwell's equations from differential to integral form. And as I went farther in physics, the derivation videos tended to get a little bit more complicated. So like nowadays, maybe I'll make a video on what the Christoffel symbols are in general relativity. But it did take me actually a pretty long time to realize that these were the style of videos that I was leaning into, vlogs and lectures. It was a lot of chaos in the videos. I've made almost 500 videos, and a lot of them were me figuring out what kind of physics I wanted to talk about, or what kind of videos I wanted to make that had to do with physics, because it sounds so specific already. But do you want to give lectures? Do you want to be making jokes? Do you want to be talking about papers that are out there? What's going on in science? Do you want to be debunking what other people are talking about? You know, there's a lot of those things where that's where the creative freedom and the personal preference really comes in. So I experimented with these kinds of videos a lot because nobody was watching. I didn't tell my friends or family that I was making videos, so there was zero stakes for making a bad video in the beginning, if that makes sense. So I'd make videos talking about my code not working, the debunking stuff sometimes. And though now I know I don't enjoy making those like debunking videos and stuff, the experimenting phase was incredibly crucial because it helped me learn what I did enjoy making. There's a lot of ways to talk about physics. Yeah, so during this phase, my channel was very much under construction, and I didn't really want anybody to know that I was making videos until I knew what I wanted to make. And it took a while. I started making daily uploads so that I could get better at editing, better at storytelling, and better at figuring out what I enjoyed making. It got to a point where that itself became my thing, just making videos every single day. And they were not, you know, mind-bending. It wasn't mind-bending content every day, not by any stretch of the imagination. But I would find a way to make a video about physics every day, nonetheless. But after, you know, a few hundred days of doing that and getting into graduate school, excuse me, I realized that that wasn't very sustainable. And I also learned that there was another type of video that I really enjoyed making, which were comedic videos or skits. And as I got further in my degree, more people started watching, and I had an idea to do a more comedic video that kind of shows the lighter side of physics, because I think people already assume we take ourselves too seriously all the time anyway. So I got some friends together from SPS. We wrote a bunch of dumb physics one-liners where we tried to make each other laugh. And that's actually where my channel really started to gain traction from the perspective of people starting to watch. Apparently there's a market for physics-based comedy. Who knew? Yeah, so to kind of catch our breath and reiterate what I've said. So I kind of leaned into these three styles of videos, these vlogs, these comedic sketches, sometimes meme reviews, and these lectures. And as I got into graduate school, as I went in further in my physics career, I could still make these kinds of videos. In the vlogs, I can't tell any more stories about what being in undergrad was like. I'm now in grad school. I've already told those stories. And with the comedic stuff, there's jokes I've already told. The lectures, I've already given how I think about that subject. I've already explained how I think about the derivation. But nevertheless, when I go further in the career, you learn more and you find more things to talk about. And though these are all wildly different formats, I think they all sort of emphasize the same thing, which is they communicate what's around the corner if you're doing physics. And so for the vlogs, I think that they show a good amount of the in-between. I'm sorry, let me check how much time. I'm doing good on time. With the vlogs, they show a lot of the in-between, not just the studying, not just the here's the paper that I wrote, but you know, the extracurricular stuff, the outreach. What am I struggling with? Like, before I understand the stuff that I need to be able to explain, what was the process of trying to understand it in the first place? What was the light bulb that went off? Seeing, I don't know, I like seeing that moment for other people. The vlogs also gave me an opportunity to put, I guess, I don't want to say spotlight, but spotlight on other people's perspectives. Because when I'm walking, I don't like just putting a camera on my face, especially when I'm in public. So if I'm in the department and I have a camera, I want to see what other people are doing. I want to see what other people are thinking about things. And that's something that's unique to vlogs. And it just makes the whole process of pursuing this PhD and whatever happens after feel more like a story rather than a list of steps. Like, do this, then do this, then do this, which might make it a bit more digestible for people. With the comedic videos, you know, I make a lot of jokes, and I'm not afraid necessarily to use jargon every now and then. I want to tell a funny joke. I don't want the joke just to be that I used jargon where you have to be in the field to understand it, and that itself is the joke. That's not particularly funny to me. But if I can come up with a funny joke that you hadn't heard before about some like a more upper division physics concept, like if I'm making a joke about delta functions or something, one observation, this was not the goal, but one observation is it gets people asking about that new stuff. You're going to learn about delta functions in E&M. There's no way around it. And when your professor opens their mouth and starts saying things like, this is what a delta function is, it's this property, it's not a function, it's a distribution, they already have to overcome this barrier, this inertia of convincing you that this is important enough to pay attention to. But with these comedic videos, it's weird. It's like I've luckily found or stumbled upon a way where it's got the students asking the first question, where I make a joke about a delta function, someone else laughs at it, and then the person goes, wait, what's a delta function? I want to get the joke. They're the ones starting the conversation. And so it's like you can bypass convincing students that something learning is important if they already know that they want to get the joke, which is, it's kind of silly, but I think that there's some truth to that. And of course, the comedic skits definitely show the lighter side of physics. I try to do a lot of self-deprecating humor and things like that. And then the lectures are more or less, you know, kind of self-explanatory. With these, I've really become a lot more passionate with this style of videos more than the others lately. Mostly because I'm at a stage where I'd really like to be helpful, and I've never been a particularly clever person when it comes to problem solving. And as a result, I think it's made me a lot more thorough over the years. And I think that's translated kind of well into video lectures. I think it's made it so that, and making video lectures maybe has helped me with how I answer or how I derive things in general. Like it goes both ways, in the sense that I really try to anticipate questions that not only I already have, but what other people could have. Like if I'm making a video on tensors, what are the questions someone could possibly have about this topic? And I'd like to address it in the video. I don't want to skip steps. I want it all to be there. That way, if it's something you already know, you can skip the explanation, but you can't rewatch the explanation that wasn't given. And so these lectures let you fill in the gaps a lot more. They also, you know, I think one thing with video lectures, if you want it to be its own thing, to stand out from an actual lecture, you can't just have it be a recording of a lecture. If your best video lecture is just trying to be an actual lecture, it's always going to fall short, because with an actual lecture, being in person is best. You know, the professor can get feedback from the students. They can read body language, look at questions. There's so much more types of communication that the professor can have that can help them communicate to you better, where if you're just recording a video that way, that feedback just isn't there. So you have to ask, what can a video lecture have that a real lecture can't? Well, if there's typos, and there's always typos when someone's writing something on lecture, that can be fixed. There can be captions that can provide further explanation that wasn't given in the lecture, pop-up images, references to papers, animations, all of these things are things that can be added to lectures to make learning better than if it were in person, or better than if it were in a textbook. And so I think nowadays people are kind of getting away from just recording a regular lecture and then just putting it on YouTube, but rather recording a lecture with it in mind that it's going to be its own thing with its own pros, not just a worse version of a regular lecture. So these different types of physics videos, I think, all give students a little bit of a peek into what physics is like in their own way. And surprisingly, it seems like they want more. They would get comments like, I don't have any clue what he's talking about when he turns to the whiteboard, but I want to know someday. So the derivation videos, they're not scaring students off. It's exciting to certain people. I think the equations look really cool. I have no idea what they're talking about, but this is the excitement that provides the motivation to want to learn and understand what the equations are describing. There will be, I don't have any in here, but there will be ones about like, I can't wait to understand the joke one day. It's just people wanting to be part of it already. I think it's exciting. So the main observation that I think I've made through trying to communicate physics these three different ways is that through, these stories, these a little bit of humor, these lectures, people become a little bit more superficially familiar with things. Like I'll get high school students watching the tensor calculus videos. They're not digesting everything, but they've heard the word tensors now. They've heard covariant derivatives now. And when someone says something like that in a classroom setting, where if you hadn't seen the video, maybe it would be your first time hearing the word, whereas now you already have a question about it, a question like, where have I heard that before? You're already curious about the new thing in physics that you didn't see on Pop Science because you saw it somewhere else and gained a very little bit of familiarity, but just enough to want to know a little bit more. It's like what Enrico Fermi says, never underestimate the joy people derive from hearing something that they already know. That works. That's like that's Fermi's other golden rule for giving presentations, by the way. Always slip some stuff in there that the audience is already aware of. So in the future, as I mentioned, I'm not an undergrad anymore. I've got another year or so left of my PhD, and then I'm applying for postdocs. But I'm about to run out of PhD stories, and I'd like to hear more about what comes next. I'd like to hear more about other people's perspectives. Postdocs who are already in the thick of it. What is it like for you? What was applying like? Professorships, applying for professorships, going from something that is still temporary, even though you have a PhD, you've done multiple postdocs, you've got a job at a university, but you're still not a permanent faculty member. Like that kind of, some insight into that would be amazing. Sharing those experiences. And when I talk to people at university or in conferences, the impression that I get is a lot of people are somewhat interested, but don't like being the center of attention. And that scares people from ever turning on the camera. They don't want to be another person with a camera making it all about them. And admittedly, when I started making videos, I did want to be the center of attention. But now it makes me a lot more uncomfortable, to the point where it started keeping me from making videos as well. But if you look at some of these things that you bring to the table, things that make your experience a bit different, the extracurriculars you do, whether that be with SPS, your little side projects, maybe building radios, doing outreach, the tools that you've been developing as you become a specialist, the coding techniques you pick up. Maybe you're good at a specific type of integral. You're good with certain types of equipment. Maybe you do late night shifts at halls at a certain experiment, or at a certain national lab, or at an observatory. There's all these things that are very interesting to people. You may not want to make a video because you have this, what makes me so special view of it. But let's consider that logic actually for a second. If what's keeping you from making videos is that you just don't think that you're special, or you just don't think anyone would care about what you have to say, let's push that. Let's test the limits of that logic. My theorem right now is that people who don't think they're special should definitely be making videos. Why? Well, if you're not special, let's assume that, whatever that means, some non-uniqueness perception that you have about yourself, then odds are some of your interests are also not unique interests, which means they are mutual interests with other people. And so that video that you kind of felt, maybe I could do that, but who cares what I have to say? That video isn't about you in the first place. It's a video about a mutual interest shared between you and some people you've never met. If you don't think, yeah, if it's the narcissism aspect that I completely understand that's keeping you from making a video, I think that's what makes it worth making in some weird sense, because I think there's always someone who has interests like us. And so if you're just talking about the interest and you make it clear that that is the focal point, you just wanted to talk about it and put it out there for other people who also like talking about that, I don't think that's making it about you. I think that's letting your passion, your enthusiasm rub off on other people. And I think that's a nice thing. So, just leave that there. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and conclude the talk here. I'd really love to see more people sharing their stories on YouTube or in different forms of social media. I'm not really touching Twitter. I'm not really touching TikTok. I don't even know who's doing stuff on there. There's all of these different social media platforms that could be effectively yours to start. That could be your thing that you upload on. There's all of these reasons for you to share your experience. I went through undergrad with a certain amount of opportunities and privileges that other people just didn't have. And the same thing goes for you, and the same thing goes for everyone else. And so there is never going to be some one size fits all, but if everyone is sharing, there will be something for everyone. I think that's an attainable goal. So I'll leave it with that. Thank you very much.
Encouraged a lot of followers or people attending today to share their knowledge as well. And like you said, it's all about shared experiences and shared learning. And so I look forward to following your journey too. Hopefully you'll do a postdoc and continue doing vlogs about your experience so that others can do similar pursuits. We do have a few questions in the Q&A, and I do want to remind our audience that you're welcome to submit them. We promise to answer as many of your questions as time allows. The first one is from one of our attendees who is interested in completing an advanced degree in physics as an international student. They're currently studying undergraduate engineering, and they would like to know how to apply for internships and other experiences so that they can hopefully pursue a master's in physics. And I can help answer this one too, but if you want to go ahead and.
Sure. And is this something that others are able to weigh in on as well? I'm definitely not the authority on this is the channel to take should you choose to pursue a degree in physics in the US as an international student. I don't have that experience, so I can't really speak as an authority on that.
And I do, so I'm happy to help.
Great. Yeah, I can say that there are research experiences like REU programs and SULI programs. I don't know off the top of my head whether those are limited to domestic students or not. That's something I would have to check. Yeah, do you have anything to add on for that?
Sure. So there are companies that do have internships for students who are interested in pursuing physics programs, and oftentimes your own university or the university that you're interested in applying for will have opportunities for you to have internships. So most universities have a career services center that allows you to explore career options as well as opportunities in industry at other universities. There's also study abroad opportunities where you can not just study, but actually do internships. So oftentimes people are not aware that you can also use a study abroad opportunity to get work and career experience. In terms of changing, so to speak, your major from engineering, so you would complete a degree in engineering, you can really pursue any advanced degree in whatever area you wish to do, including physics. If you did not major in physics as an undergrad, however, there may be some base requirements that you have to complete. in order to begin the master's program or prior to that. So those are all things that I would encourage you to discuss with your faculty advisor or a faculty member at your university, and they can really guide you in the process. And then when you contact universities in the US to apply for admission, they can walk you through the process, tell you what's required, as well as talk about some of those requirements for entering a different degree than you did as an undergrad. So I hope that's helpful to you.
Yeah.
We also have another question asking about what is your approach for PP's electrodynamics?
What is your approach for, I don't understand the question.
So the person who submitted that question, you're welcome to submit a clarifying question again, and we'll move on to another one until you do that.
Oh, that might be a reference. I think they're just making
Okay.
a reference to one of my videos, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're just making a joke. I see the next one that says, is it preferable to look for a good university if possible, or just settle for a nearby one? If I could do things all over, I would probably, I don't know. I think with how specific it feels like my research is now, there's a 0% chance I could have called my shot and been like, that's what I'm going to be researching. This is what my life is going to be like. And so there's part of me that wants to say, don't worry too much on where you go to undergraduate, because you're going to learn so much over the next few years. And the more you learn, the more you'll find interesting. And the more you find interesting, the more diverse types of projects will catch your eye, and you could see yourself saying, oh, maybe I'll do research with this professor. So I would say keep an open mind. I think local universities are a great idea, especially community colleges for the first couple of years. You're going to have to take gen eds anyway. You could, so, it depends on everyone's situation. Everyone's situation is different. But especially if the financial burden of university is really heavy for you, then something like going to a community college where maybe no one's told you that you're going to be taking pretty much the same classes for your first couple of years, and you'll save half the money, like things like that. I don't think your undergraduate university is as impactful for where you will end up with your research, if that's what the question is asking. Once you go to graduate school, I think it is a bit more important, because you want to connect with an advisor whose research interests are similar to yours. And even when you're applying to graduate school, I can't speak for everybody, but when I was applying for graduate school, I didn't have this hyper-specific idea of what I wanted to research. I just knew I wanted to do theoretical nuclear physics. And there's perturbative QCD, there's non-perturbative continuum QCD, lattice QCD, exotic meson spectroscopy. There's so many different pockets of research, and it would be way too overwhelming for me at the time to say, I'm going to do this. I didn't know enough about physics to really do that. And so my approach was to apply to graduate schools that offered a variety. So when I applied to NMSU, for example, I applied there partially because, well, let's be honest, my fiance applied there as well, and I wanted to go where she went, but also because they offered specialties in nuclear physics that were in different subsubjects within nuclear physics. So I felt like I had options. I didn't have to commit to something, and if I didn't like it, oh well. So, maybe check out Grad School Shopper, put in your research interests, see what pops up. Check with the university itself, because sometimes it's not 100%. They'll say they offer programs that they actually don't or aren't really known for. So yeah, I'll leave that short answer long. I hope that helps.
And adding to what you said, I would also encourage you to explore and ask questions of universities as to whether or not they offer undergraduate research, because not all universities offer opportunities for students to engage in undergraduate research. And when you have those opportunities, you're able to discover whether you like a particular area of physics, or perhaps that area of physics it's not for you and you would like to explore a different one.
Absolutely.
People are curious too if you have an update on the problem you've been stuck on for your latest video, and if so, when.
Yeah, so this is referencing, I made a video pointing out that I'd been stuck on a problem in my research for over 2 years. And in that time, I was able to work on other tangentially related things to my research to keep, moving the needle forward a little bit. But there was this one piece that I couldn't move on from until I resolved. And it took me a couple years to, I made a video saying, I think I might have an idea. This might be the solution on this issue I'd been stuck on. And it ended up working out. So the issue that I had, it was a calculational issue. It was like this constraint that had to be satisfied in order to trust that my calculation was correct, and it wasn't satisfied. And so I found out what was wrong. I fixed it. I spent like a week or two convincing myself that I wasn't crazy and that my reasoning for now it's really correct. I wasn't just seeing what I wanted to see. I met with my advisor. We talked for like 3 hours, coming up with examples, trying to come up with counter examples to my solution. And after we were thoroughly unconvinced that a counter example existed, then we were like, okay, cool, we've got this. It's time to move on. And since then, all of the rest of the project is done, and we're writing the paper now. So it's amazing. It was so, 2 years to be stuck on a problem that you're trying to solve, and you kind of tell yourself, like we tell ourselves in physics, that this is a field that teaches you how to think critically. It's a field where you leave physics and you should feel something like a professional learner. Like there should be nothing you can't learn if you go far enough with this, I think. And so to view physics as giving you those tools, and then me be stuck on a problem for 2 years, that was like, that's not supposed to happen. And so that was really discouraging. But then, I guess not giving up and trying new ideas, the issue resolved, and so much happened, so much good happened so fast after that.
What did it feel like to solve something that you've been working on for 2 years?
I didn't trust it. I was like, because I'd had so many ideas before then, like maybe this is what it is. And I came up with a bunch of complicated things that could have happened, like issues in the calculation that could have gone wrong, because it's just kind of objectively harder stages or steps of the calculation. Like just stuff where it's easy to lose a factor of 2 or something like that. And so I went through all of that stuff, and it kept looking okay. And the idea that I had that did resolve the issue was so much simpler, to where I had a hard time believing it, that it could be as simple as the answer actually was. And I had a hard time, I don't know, when I was an undergrad, I had this issue especially of solving a problem in like undergraduate research, moving on, talking with my advisor, doing the next stage, and then realizing like the next stage is giving nonsense, and realizing it's because I shouldn't have actually moved on from the previous step yet. I shouldn't have trusted my result. There was another test that I didn't think of, and if I had thought of it, I would have seen that I was wrong. And so that kind of is always in my head, that I don't want to be too confident and then be wrong. I think that's just how all scientists kind of are, where it's like you come up with a certain criteria where if that criteria is satisfied, you move on. And if you do that and you move on, you find out you're wrong, you're like, damn, why couldn't I tell that my test wasn't robust enough? And so, yeah, there was a lot of like not letting myself get excited about it until I threw every test I could possibly come up with. And I came up with one that was the kill shot. It wasn't that's I think that was different between me now and me maybe in undergrad. Was in undergrad, it would be like, here's a bunch of little tests where none specifically 100% mean that I couldn't be wrong. But if all of them are satisfied, what's the likelihood that I'm wrong? Whereas with this one, I scratched my head until I was like, if this is satisfied, it has to be correct. And so that was a moment recognizing that I feel like I grew a little bit there.
Definitely. And I imagine it was very satisfying. And it's also good for people to hear that it is a difficult field and it does sometimes take years to come up with that answer, but just encouraging people to not give up and just be persistent because you will get there one day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the 10 years is going to go by regardless, right? You might as well have a PhD in physics at the end of it.
Exactly. That's actually my motto. I had that advice for grad school too. Somebody said, listen, you can keep talking about what you want to do, or you can get the degree. And what do you think is the most important when applying for graduate school in order to get accepted? So what helped you become a strong candidate when you were applying for graduate school?
I feel like it's kind of like that salesman thing. I would never survive in sales, but I think there's that saying where it's like, to be a good salesperson, it's not about convincing them that the product is so great. It's about convincing them that you believe that the product is so great. And so I think what's important for applying to graduate school is you don't need to tell the committee how amazing physics is. I think you need to convince them that you've convinced yourself that research is for you. They're going to be putting in maybe a 5+ year investment into training you into becoming a professional researcher. They're going to trust you with teaching their students. They're going to, the professors will take time educating you, to giving you your exams and trying to build you up to be a professional. And before they do that, I'm sure they want to know that you've thought about this before, that you've put some real time into thinking, why is it that you actually want to be a researcher? And so there's, to me, no better way to communicate that than demonstrating that you do have research experience. So if you've done an REU, if you've done a SULI program, if you've got a summer of research under your belt, you don't even have to necessarily like that project. You don't have to do an REU and cross your fingers that hopefully this is the project that I like, so that I can talk about how much I love it when I'm applying to grad school. You don't have to do that. No one expects you to know that much about your career path, but they do expect you to have taken those steps. Yeah.
And to clarify, an REU is an undergraduate research experience. And so that's a specific term that we use in the US to talk about some formal opportunities to engage in research with faculty at various universities across the US. This typically does happen in the summer, and most are paid opportunities, if not all. And going back to the research piece, anything you can do to gain that undergraduate research experience is really going to strengthen your application for graduate school. And things like even our experience in the REYES program, where if you are participating in the mentoring program, you can actually show that you had an experience to work virtually with a researcher on a research project, and then add that to your application. All of those experiences count. And people are asking, when should I start learning programming and which language if I'm aspiring to work in the field of QCD?
I don't know. Everyone has their preferences. For myself, I think it's always good to know what I refer to as like a real programming language and a programming language that just makes your life easier, one that's more user-friendly. And so I think it's always good to learn a language that's object-oriented. I think it's always good to learn a language that's a compiled language, like C++, and maybe one that's interpreted like Python. Python, if you're not using certain packages, can be a lot slower with computation, but you tell it what you want it to do and it's going to freaking try to do it. Whereas, you don't want to scan through hundreds of lines of headings and stuff and semicolons for your C++ document every time you want to do some simple scripting. And so when you need something you'll need something that's efficient, you'll need a language that's efficient, and you'll need one that you can mess around with. I think Python is kind of like the best of both worlds because it has packages that are written in like things like C++ anyway. And so they are a lot faster if you use packages like NumPy. So I'm a big advocate for Python. I think that one's great. C++ is good. The thing with like nuclear and particle physics is most of the codes that were probably written in Fortran. So I don't know, I guess it's kind of like textbooks. Like, what textbook should you get? You should get the one that you learn best from, and you should probably get the one that your advisor has as well to make communication easier. So like, if you really like Python but your advisor likes C++, you should learn how to speak their language a little bit. And so, you know, maybe your advisor knows Fortran, maybe your advisor is big on C++. So I guess what I'm getting at is the environment will probably push you to learn one, and then maybe just start messing around with something like Python in the meantime. Maybe that's a smart way to go.
And I know that Python is really encouraged in the REYES program by a lot of our physics professors. And in fact, Raul Briceño and some of his physics colleagues got together and over the summers have put together a free course on Python. So if you go through the REYES-STEM YouTube page, you can actually find those courses and you can feel free to follow them and learn Python for free. We have them available in English and Spanish. And also this summer, they're also teaching another session on Python. So if you're interested, take advantage of it.
That's really cool that you bring that up, because I don't know, not even less than 10 years ago, it seemed like there were all of these numerical recipe books for things like C++ and Fortran, but I think it was pretty hard to find example codes of various subroutines, useful subroutines for physics in Python. And so now if you're having ones that are videos created by nuclear physicists, that stuff is going to be very, very useful. That's awesome that they're doing that.
Mm-hmm. Someone's asking, when, talking about undergraduate research, should they prioritize a lab that publishes often or one that they match well with? Furthermore, how realistic is undergrad theory research? Because a lot of the undergrad research opportunities they find are either experimental or computational. Really good question.
Yeah, that is so the first one, undergraduate research, prioritize a lab that publishes often. So it's not the lab necessarily that's pushing. Well, okay, let me think of how to say it. You're working at a lab, you're working with a person, and it's that person's proposed idea and how much they think a student can take off. And it comes down, I think, more so to the advisor than the lab. Mm-hmm. I don't think I would be too choosy with, let me not go to this lab because they're not going to publish. I wouldn't worry about that too much. I don't see anything wrong with reaching out to your prospective advisor and asking about the likelihood that the project you work on would turn into something that's publishable. I think that's completely fair. So yeah, if you feel like you need to get a paper, if that's your thing, is you want to absolutely have a paper out before you leave undergrad, apply to the programs pretty indiscriminately. And if you're accepted to more than one program, maybe talk to the advisor or the PI and ask about the prospects of publishing that work. That might be the way to go.
I would also encourage you to reach out to some of the REYES mentors and faculty members. They're so willing to share their knowledge, and you may, I would say, proactively take initiative and let them know what you're interested in doing. And if it aligns with something that they're doing, who knows, they may have an opportunity or an opening for you to participate in a project. So I would always encourage to ask, because if you don't ask, the answer is always going to be no. How many hours a day did you study as an undergrad, and how many as a grad student now?
Undergrad, let's see. Early undergrad, I still had way too much knucklehead in me. I didn't get too much studying done. But once I moved back home and switched to physics, I got a lot more studying done. If I had to put hours into it, I don't know. I can't remember for undergrad how many hours I'd have put into it. I might have said it in some of the videos where because I had videos where I said I'm studying for something specific. Maybe in those I referenced them, I'm not sure. But for grad school, the first 2 years, you put a lot of time into studying, and first 2 years of grad school, yeah, I was staying up pretty late. Those were the ones where it was like, I don't even think there's enough. You could give me 2 weeks. I don't know how I'm going to finish this. Like, it's the magnitude can be pretty daunting at times, especially if you have poor communication with your professors. I don't know. I've never really sat down and actually added up the number of hours that I was studying. It felt like I didn't. Let me put it this way. I have a lot of hobbies, and my first 2 years of grad school, I didn't do a lot of my hobbies. I didn't have a lot of free time, but I was also obsessed with trying to get straight A's, partially because I was like, no, I've never done that before. That would be pretty cool to do that in grad school. In graduate physics classes. And I also was rejected from the school that I'm going to for the first time that I applied. I was waitlisted and then rejected. And so I moved there anyways and paid to take classes as non-degree seeking, the graduate physics courses, and reapplied the next semester. And so that first year or two, I was just like hell bent on, I'm going to prove to you that I belong to be here. And so, I definitely kind of killed myself a little bit, trying to get A's on everything. I think someone once told me, if you're getting A's in all of your graduate classes, you're not doing enough research. I wouldn't use that as an excuse to just never do your assignments, but there might be some truth to that, because I really feel like I did nothing but homework and study my first couple years of grad school. I don't want to scare anybody, but those ones are, I don't know, you should know what you're going into. The workload is bigger than an undergrad, but it comes with the benefit that after you take your qualifying exams or your comprehensive or whatever, the next half, the last 3 years or so, you have a lot more free time. So yeah.
I know for undergrad, I've heard a formula that you should study about an hour for every credit that you're taking a week, but that's a lot of hours. So
yeah, I don't know. Something that just says, I'm not a huge fan of like, do this many reps of something. I think you should do
exactly,
it with a purpose.
it just depends on the individual.
Yeah, like how much you study depends on how much you're. I think there's certain things that I started doing that helped me speed up studying. Like I used to call them like doing the hidden exercises in books. Like if I was reading something and you'd read something like, from this it follows that, or from which it follows, it's trivial to see, I always would try to fill in the gaps. And so I don't know, because if you're just reading pages, I think so much of that is going out of my head. But if I'm having to connect the dots each page a little bit, just do the one line, a couple lines of algebra, whatever it is, it's stuck in a lot more. And so I was pretty big also on I'm starting to understand how to answer the question a little bit better. When I was studying, I think how I would study and do my homework assignments, it would take about as much time, if not less time, than when I was studying for exams. And that's because I took my homework so seriously, especially in grad school. I started typing up all of my homeworks and putting images and plots and stuff in it, not because, well, I mean, I'm sure there's part of me that was like, my professor's going to appreciate that. But it was really more selfish reasons, because when it came back to doing revision, reviewing my notes to study for exams, if I would read a paper that was just chicken scratch written out and like partially erased lines of work so that your professor thinks you were, I don't know, sometimes it's like people are trying to make it hard to read so that it looks like you did more. I don't know. But if you're reading that, if that's what you're reviewing to help with your exams, as opposed to you have this nicely typed out LaTeX document where all of my assumptions, every page where I found an equation on, how I'm interpreting things, all of that goes into the homework, not from my professor, but so that I remember how I was thinking. And so I think that tacked on a good amount of time into how long it took me to finish assignments, but it saved me time for studying. And I think it's that studying, that trying to recall. I don't know. I'd be interested if people see it the other way, where they'd rather spend the time studying for the exam rather than like doing it at the end, rather throughout and having less to do at the end. But that's worked really well for me.
It really does vary by learner, honestly. I think that it's once you start studying, you'll get the hang of it. You'll determine what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and you'll almost come up with your own process. Those are really good questions. The next one is regarding why do universities not necessarily provide a master's in physics? Some of the examples were MIT or Harvard, and only an undergraduate and PhD. And the simple answer to that is that some schools, or most schools, to allow students to go in from an undergraduate straight into a PhD program. And I know that that's not common knowledge necessarily, but you may not always need to have a master's to be enrolled in a doctoral program. You just have to inquire again, make sure that you have the requirements, and apply on time. Let's see, we are running a little bit out of time. So let's see, do you want to just take a quick look through the questions, Andrew, and see if there's any that we can answer in the short time that we have?
Let's see. See a couple that we can do. I think, considering you've been involved in social media, I'm interested in knowing what your opinion on the spreading of misinformation in social media and their effects on science. I'm having a talk soon on this topic and curious to see your perspective on it. Oh, I didn't read the whole question before I singled that one out. I think there's always going to be there's almost always a difference between what was said, what was heard, and what was meant. Even if I'm not saying something incorrect, like if I'm trying to communicate something to you, everyone's experienced that. And I think communication becomes a lot easier if you let it be an iterative process. If you put something out there, someone provides you with some feedback, and then you take that in, you go, oh, okay, I was telling you about this thing. It hit your ear wrong because you have these other experiences that I couldn't have anticipated, but nevertheless, we're communicating because someone's point, you want someone's point to come across, and I want you to be as receptive as possible to the point that I'm making. And if I can anticipate that you probably have your own experiences that'll make it harder or easier to hear what I have to say, then if I'm open to the idea that maybe I send it out there, you give me some feedback and I got to tweak it a little bit, and now things are, I think communication gets so much easier when you don't require that someone speak 100% correctly immediately. I think it's too frustrating to communicate with people that way, where they have to say the right thing immediately. It's like if you were to have some code where it's outputting the result, but your algorithm is iterative and you know it's going to slowly converge to the correct answer, but then you're printing the answer every time anyway and getting super frustrated that it's not correct yet. It's like, yeah, it's not supposed to be correct yet. You got to let it iterate and we'll get there. And so the same thing, I think, goes with this concept of spreading misinformation. It's maybe presumptuous on both ends of what the perceived other side is trying to say. And so just saying, we need to stop this. We need to stop people from being able to say this. I think that's a very slippery slope. Personally, I think it's much better to encourage people to learn how to discern and filter good information from bad information themselves, rather than insist all people who speak to me say the correct thing, because otherwise I can't do it. I don't know. I think I'm kind of dancing around a point.
I think your point about information literacy is an important one, because whenever part of going to a university is also learning what is a reliable source for your research and for information. And so I think that piece of it is so important also in helping to determine what is a good solid source of information and what is not.
Yeah. If you get to say something is misinformation, I mean, I don't know. I've been wrong way too many times while being confident about something. To talk to people in very matter-of-fact ways anymore, that this is how things are, or you are wrong, or this is not correct. And a lot of that has been like, I may be answering some question correct. I may be giving some valid opinion, but maybe I misunderstood the question that they were asking. And my answer is the correct answer for some question, but it's not the correct answer to the question that they're actually asking. And so in that same sense of like hearing someone say something and be like, you're spreading misinformation, that's very, are you sure? I don't know, there's interpretations. Are you sure you're interpreting what they're saying correctly? There's so much more room for error there. Or I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say, but to be so sure of yourself that you would just tell someone you're not allowed to say things because you're going to misspeak doesn't sound like the right thing to do. I think like Giovanna said as well, like teaching people to tell the difference between good information and bad information will age better for you than hoping everybody collectively pulls in the same direction of not misspeaking and seeing where that gets us.
And also the importance of having people push on your ideas, because they may be bringing a different opinion that you may not have thought about before, or a different angle that can actually strengthen your research, right? And I think just keeping an open mind that what we know today is going to change in the future as science advances. You look at things like, carbon dating bones or anything like that. That's only as good as technology at a specific time. And now there's been revisions to previous publications, because we know that, certain bones have been uncovered that are 2,000 years earlier than predicted. And so again, just stay open that what we know today may also change in the future, and that other people may have valuable ideas that may contradict what you're presenting, but in the end may make your research a lot stronger.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of there's a video I made that was just a skit. It was complete joke. Skit was literally in the title. It was like a flat earth physicist, like a physicist who thinks the earth is flat. And it was just making a bunch of jokes about, I was like, if I had, it was almost world building, where it's like, if I had to make this stuff make sense, how could I make it do it? What could their arguments possibly be? And the number of comments from people telling me that I was spreading misinformation, that there's no way I could be a scientist, that Dr. Ed Eott isn't a real person, and University College Collegiate isn't a real place. And I'm like, okay, maybe this is an example of why people should flex that muscle that helps you tell, am I spreading misinformation, or did I make a joke?
Yeah, are you just making a skit?
There's so many comments from, and they're all from the people who considered themselves the scientifically literate. All of the flat earth people, I kind of felt bad because it was kind of poking fun, and then when if actual flat earth people read it and get the feelings hurt, I don't feel good about that. But they could tell that it was a joke at their expense, but the scientifically literate people were the ones who thought it was completely serious. So yeah, this whole thing of like, who gets to decide what's misinformation?
That's right.
Yeah.
So I know that was a pretty complex question.
Yeah, sorry for the rambling. I know I couldn't.
No, that was.
Straight.
I honestly feel that we could just have a whole session on this subject. It's complex. The next question we have, and we'll just take two more really quickly. One is a recommendation. They would like to see you make a video on renormalization, group theory, and phase transitions. And the last one may not also be a simple one, but they would like to know, what is one of the most valuable lessons that you have learned throughout your career as a physicist?
For the renormalization group theory stuff, yeah, as far as like videos that I'd really like to make in the future, the direction I kind of want to take my channel is, nowadays it seems like the best way to learn still is a textbook. Even though technology is so much better, there's still not online resources that are widely accepted as better than the textbook on the topic. Like if you need to learn undergraduate level electromagnetism, you are probably cracking open Griffith's E&M. But I don't think there's any reason that has to be the case anymore. And so I'd really like to pour like some blood, sweat, and tears, put real care into a lecture series that ages well, a lecture series that people could view as being as an integral part of being a physics student as Griffith's E&M is, but maybe it'll be video lectures. And so for something like the topics you mentioned are all important in quantum field theory. And I think that will probably be the topic that I do that with, but I don't want to even touch it until I know I have the time to put the care into it that it really deserves, because I want to do a really good job with it. So it's coming, but not anytime soon. I want a fully fleshed out idea before I touch it, because I want it to be like, I want that to be, I guess, what if people do remember something about the channel, they'll think it was really useful for teaching. I think that would be great. I guess the last one, oh no, there's two more. Most valuable lessons learned throughout career as a physicist. I think I already said it, the fact, just paying attention to being confident and wrong and seeing how that's kind of affected how I interact with people, not just when it comes to solving problems, but how I communicate with people. I think always having in the back of my head that I've been super confident before and been wrong, and I'm super confident right now, identically confident, indistinguishably confident from the time that I was confident and wrong. Maybe let me change my tone a little bit. Maybe let me keep my mouth shut and get a little bit more out of you of why you think the way that you do. And maybe you'll change my mind before I even have to open my mouth. I think, I don't know how to phrase that in terms of a lesson, but that's something that I needed personally. Like, I think that's been a big improvement in my life, is not toning down the arrogance, I guess, a little bit, just being open to the idea that at any point I could be wrong about what I'm saying. And that sounds like such a confidence crushing thing. Maybe some people don't need that. I think I'm a person who kind of needed that. So that's a big lesson for me.
That is a big lesson, to stay confident without being arrogant and just staying open to other people's ideas, because you never know how that will extend your idea or even make your research better, right? Mm-hmm. That's a great life lesson for physics and for many other applications in life. Well, thank you again for joining us and for being with us all 4 years of our summer REYES program. We love having you, and we so appreciate everything you do to open access to science, make it fun in the process, and inspire people from around the globe to pursue and consider a career in physics. So thanks again for being here. We look forward to having all of our REYES learners here next week. We'll be sending our weekly summary of next week's schedule during the weekend. And we hope you all have a wonderful weekend. And thank you again for joining us, Andrew.
Thank you so much. Do you know if the questions or anything like that will be visible in the stream or on YouTube? Because I might want to tweak some answers that I stumbled over, if possible.
Sure. I will ask our IT team if they can please send us a copy of all the questions that were asked so I can share them with you. I don't believe that they are visible on the YouTube channel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye.